The fluorescent lights buzzed softly in the empty hallway of Westbridge Preparatory Academy. It was past 8 in the evening, and most people had gone home hours ago. But Roberto Flores was still there, pushing his mop cart down the polished marble floors, making everything shine for tomorrow's classes. His daughter, 15-year-old Isabella, sat on a bench near the main entrance, her backpack beside her, finishing up some homework. She came here 3 times a week after her own classes ended at the public school across town. Her father's shift didn't end until 9, and she'd rather wait for him here than take 2 buses home alone. But homework could only hold her attention for so long. What really drew Isabella were the sounds drifting through the hallways. Beautiful, haunting sounds, the kind that made her chest feel tight and her eyes water for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Music. She closed her textbook and followed the sound. It led her down the west corridor, past trophy cases filled with awards and photographs of successful students. Her worn sneakers made soft squeaking sounds on the freshly mopped floor, and she felt a little guilty knowing her father would have to clean them again. The music grew louder. It was coming from the rehearsal hall, a grand room with high ceilings and perfect acoustics. Isabella had peeked inside before, but never when someone was playing. She pressed herself against the wall beside the tall wooden doors and listened. A violin. Someone was practicing a piece that started slow and sad, then suddenly exploded into something fast and passionate. The player made a mistake, stopped, and started again from the beginning. Isabella closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. She imagined what it would feel like to create something so beautiful, to make an instrument sing like that. She didn't notice the 3 teachers walking down the hallway until one of them spoke. Well, what do we have here? Isabella's eyes snapped open. 3 adults stood a few feet away, all dressed professionally, all looking at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. The man who'd spoken was tall and thin, with silver hair and an expensive-looking suit. The woman next to him wore glasses and had her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. The third teacher, an older woman with kind eyes that somehow didn't match her cold smile, held a stack of folders. "I'm sorry," Isabella said quickly, taking a step back. "I was just listening. I didn't touch anything, I promise." "Relax," the tall man said, waving his hand dismissively. "You're Roberto's daughter, aren't you?" "The janitor?" Isabella nodded. She hated how he said the janitor, like it was something shameful. Her father worked hard. He was proud of his work. He kept this entire building clean and functional. "I'm Mr. Patterson," the man continued. "These are my colleagues, Mrs. Kim and Dr. Reynolds. We run the music program here at Westbridge." "It's beautiful," Isabella said softly, gesturing toward the rehearsal hall. "The music, I mean." Mrs. Kim let out a small laugh, quickly covering it with a cough. Dr. Reynolds looked away, but Isabella caught the slight smirk on her face. Something felt off, but Isabella couldn't figure out what. "Do you play any instruments?" Mr. Patterson asked, his tone suddenly bright and interested. "No, sir," Isabella admitted. "I mean, I'd like to. But lessons are expensive, and we can't really—" She trailed off, feeling her cheeks burn. Why was she telling them this? They probably made more in a month than her father made in a year. They wouldn't understand. But Mr. Patterson's face lit up like he'd just had the most wonderful idea. He turned to his colleagues, and Isabella saw them exchange glances. Mrs. Kim raised her eyebrows. Dr. Reynolds shrugged, but she was smiling now. "You know what?" Mr. Patterson said, turning back to Isabella. "We have our annual spring gala coming up in 2 weeks. It's a big event. Parents, donors, important people from the community. We showcase our talented students." Isabella nodded politely, wondering why he was telling her this. "How would you like to perform?" he asked. Isabella's heart jumped. "What, me? But I don't play anything. I just said—" "Oh, come now," Mr. Patterson interrupted, his smile growing wider. "I'm sure you're being modest. Perhaps the violin? You seemed very interested in the violin music." "I really don't know how to play," Isabella insisted, confused. "I've never even held one." Mrs. Kim stepped forward, her voice sweet as honey. "That's the beauty of natural talent, dear. Some people just have it. They don't need years of expensive lessons. They can just feel the music." Isabella's mind raced. This didn't make sense. Professional musicians trained for years. She'd read about it online, watched videos. You didn't just pick up a violin and play at some fancy gala. But these were teachers, important teachers at one of the best schools in the city. Maybe they saw something in her that she didn't see in herself. We'll provide the violin, of course, Dr. Reynolds added, and the sheet music. Something simple. Nothing too complicated. It'll be wonderful exposure for you. Exposure. The word hung in the air. Isabella thought about the students who went to this school, the opportunities they had, the doors that opened for them. What if this was her chance? What if she really did have some hidden talent? There will be video recordings, Mr. Patterson said. Photos. The local newspaper usually covers the event. Who knows? You might even get noticed by someone who could help your situation, her situation. Isabella knew what he meant. Poor girl from the wrong side of town. Father who cleaned toilets for a living probably wouldn't make it past community college if she was lucky. I don't know, Isabella said slowly. 2 weeks isn't very much time to learn. Oh, don't worry about that, Mrs. Kim said quickly. Like I said, natural talent. You'll be fine. Just practice a little bit each day. Follow your instincts. The 3 teachers were all smiling at her now, warm and encouraging. Isabella wanted to believe them. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be special, that she could stand on that stage and make beautiful music and prove that she was more than just the janitor's daughter. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll do it. Mr. Patterson clapped his hands together. Wonderful. Just wonderful. We'll have everything ready for you. Check with the music office tomorrow after school, and we'll give you what you need. As the teachers walked away, Isabella heard Mrs. Kim whisper something, followed by quiet laughter. She tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in her stomach. They were probably just excited about giving her this opportunity. Her father appeared at the end of the hallway, pushing his cart. He looked tired like he always did at the end of his shift, but he smiled when he saw her. Ready to go home, Mija? He called out. Dad, Isabella said, jogging over to him. You won't believe what just happened. As they walked toward the exit, Isabella told him about the gala, about the invitation to perform. Roberto's smile faded slightly. Are you sure about this? He asked carefully. Those violin lessons are very expensive. We looked into it before, remember? They said I don't need lessons, Isabella explained. They said some people just have natural talent. Roberto stopped walking. He looked at his daughter's excited face, her bright eyes, and felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd worked at this school for 10 years. He'd seen how these wealthy people treated others like him, like them. He knew how the world worked. But he also saw his daughter's hope, that spark of possibility. Who was he to crush that? Okay, Mija, he said quietly. If this is what you want to do, we'll find a way. Isabella hugged him tight, already imagining herself on that stage, proving everyone wrong about who she could be. She had no idea that the teachers were counting on her to fail, that they'd already started telling their colleagues about the amusing entertainment they'd arranged for the gala's opening, that her performance was meant to be a joke, a reminder to everyone there about the difference between real talent and wishful thinking. But Roberto suspected. And as they walked out into the cool night air, he made a quiet decision. Whatever it took, he would help his daughter prepare. Because if she was going to stand on that stage, she wouldn't be anyone's punchline. Not if he could help it. Isabella couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling of the apartment she shared with her father. The springs in the old mattress creaked every time she moved. Through the thin walls, she could hear the neighbor's television and someone's baby crying 2 floors up. But none of that bothered her tonight. Her mind was racing with thoughts of the gala, of standing on that stage, of proving to everyone that she could be somebody. There was just one problem, a big problem that she hadn't told the teachers about. She did know how to play the violin. Sort of. Isabella sat up in bed and reached under it, pulling out a worn black case. The latches were rusty, and one of the hinges was held together with duct tape. She opened it carefully, revealing a violin that had seen better days, much better days. The wood was scratched and dull. Someone had tried to repair a crack along the side with some kind of glue that had turned yellow over time. One of the tuning pegs was slightly loose. The bow's horsehair was uneven, and the whole thing looked like something you'd find at a yard sale for $5. Because that's exactly where it had come from. 3 years ago, Isabella had been walking home from school when she spotted it at an estate sale in her neighborhood. An old woman had passed away and her family was selling everything. The violin sat on a folding table between a stack of old magazines and a broken toaster, marked at $3. Isabella had exactly $5 in her pocket, money she'd earned helping Mrs. Chen downstairs with her grocery shopping. She'd been saving it for a new notebook for school. But something about that violin called to her. She picked it up carefully, amazed at how light it was, how it seemed to fit perfectly under her chin even though she had no idea what she was doing. "You play?" the woman running the sale had asked. "No," Isabella admitted, "but I'd like to learn." The woman smiled sadly. "That was my mother's. She played in the church orchestra for 40 years. It's not in great shape anymore, but it still makes sound. Tell you what, $2 and it's yours." My mom would have liked knowing someone wanted to learn. Isabella had taken it home, hidden it under her bed, and then spent the next week watching free videos on her phone, trying to figure out how to make it work. The first sounds she produced were so awful that her father knocked on her door, genuinely concerned that something was dying in her room. "What is that noise?" Roberto had asked, opening the door. Isabella's face had burned red as she showed him the violin. She expected him to be angry that she'd spent money on something so useless, so impractical. Instead, his eyes got watery. "Your mother played a little," he said softly. "Nothing professional, but she loved music. She always said she wished we could afford lessons for you." Isabella's mother had died when she was 7. Cancer. She had a few hazy memories of her singing in the kitchen, humming while she cooked, dancing with Isabella in the living room to songs on the radio. "I can learn on my own," Isabella had said firmly. "There are videos online, free ones. I don't need expensive lessons." And she'd tried. For 3 years, she'd tried. Every night after homework, she'd practice in her room with the volume as low as possible so the neighbors wouldn't complain. She learned to read music from free websites. She watched countless tutorials, pausing and rewinding, copying what she saw. But there was only so much you could learn from a phone screen and a broken violin. She could play simple songs now, children's melodies, basic scales, but nothing fancy, nothing that would impress anyone, especially not the kind of people who would be at that gala. The gap between what she could do and what those Westbridge students could do was huge, like comparing someone who could write their name to someone who could write a novel. Isabella closed the violin case and shoved it back under her bed. Maybe she should tell the teachers the truth tomorrow. Admit that she'd misunderstood, that she wasn't ready, that this was all a mistake. But then she thought about Mrs. Kim's words. Natural talent. Some people just have it. What if they really did see something special in her? What if she practiced really hard for the next 2 weeks? What if she could actually pull this off? The next day after school, Isabella went to Westbridge's music office like the teachers had told her to. A student assistant gave her a violin case, much nicer than hers, and a folder of sheet music. "Mr. Patterson said to give you this," the student said, barely looking up from her phone. "It's for the gala thing." Isabella took everything to a quiet corner of the school library and opened the folder. Her stomach dropped. The piece was called Meditation from Thais by someone named Massenet. She'd never heard of it. She pulled out her phone and searched for a recording, plugging in her earbuds. The music was beautiful, slow and sweet and emotional, but as she listened, watching the violinist's fingers in the video, Isabella felt panic rising in her chest. This wasn't a beginner's piece. This required smooth bow control, vibrato, shifting positions on the fingerboard, things she'd only just started learning from her online videos. She had 2 weeks. Isabella gathered everything and rushed out of the library. She needed to find her father, tell him this wouldn't work, give the violin back before she embarrassed herself. But as she hurried down the hallway, she passed the music rehearsal hall. The door was slightly open, and she could see students inside laughing and talking while they packed up their instruments. These kids probably had private lessons since they were 5 years old. They probably had parents who paid hundreds of dollars an hour for the best teachers. And then Isabella heard voices around the corner. She recognized them immediately. Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Kim, and Dr. Reynolds. "Did you see her face when we asked her to perform?" Mrs. Kim was saying, her voice bright with amusement. "She actually thinks she can do it." "Well, it'll certainly be entertaining," Mr. Patterson replied. "Nothing like a little reality check to remind everyone the importance of proper training and, shall we say, breeding." Dr. Reynolds laughed. "I almost feel bad. Almost, but the parents will love it. Shows them exactly why they're paying top dollar for their children's education here." The meditation piece was a nice touch, Mrs. Kim added. "Not too complicated that people will blame us for setting her up, but difficult enough that she'll struggle through it." "Perfect." Isabella pressed herself against the wall. her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. The violin case suddenly felt heavy in her hands. The folder of sheet music felt like it was burning her fingers. They'd set her up. This whole thing was a joke. They wanted her to fail. They wanted to use her to make themselves look good, to remind all those rich parents why they should keep paying for expensive lessons and fancy schools. She should walk away. She should dump this violin and this music in the nearest trash can and never come back to this building, except to wait for her father's shift to end. But something stopped her. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the memory of her mother humming in the kitchen, or her father's tired smile every night when he came home from mopping these same floors. Isabella looked down at the sheet music in her hands. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to learn a piece that should take months or years. 2 weeks to go from barely competent to performance ready. It was impossible. But what if it wasn't? That evening, Isabella didn't go straight home with her father. She told him she needed to stay at the public library to work on a project. He looked at her carefully like he knew something was wrong, but he nodded. "Don't stay too late, and text me when you leave." After he drove away in their old car, Isabella walked 3 blocks to a part of town she rarely visited. The buildings here were older, shabbier than the rest of the city. Paint peeled from walls. Broken signs hung crooked above storefronts. She stopped in front of a small shop squeezed between a laundromat and a closed-down restaurant. The sign read, "Levinson's Instrument Repair." Isabella had found this place 6 months ago when one of her violin's strings broke and she couldn't afford to buy a new one. The man who ran it, an elderly gentleman with kind eyes and shaky hands, had replaced it for free when he learned she was teaching herself. She pushed open the door. A bell chimed. The shop smelled like wood and old paper and something sweet like vanilla. "Mr. Levinson?" she called out. An old man emerged from the back room, wiping his hands on a rag. His face lit up when he saw her. "Isabella, it's been a while. How's the violin holding up?" "It's fine," she said. Then, before she could stop herself, the whole story came pouring out. The teachers, the gala, the joke, the impossible piece of music, everything. When she finished, she was crying. Mr. Levinson handed her a clean handkerchief and waited patiently while she wiped her eyes. "So you see," she said finally, "it's hopeless. I should just give up." Mr. Levinson was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to a corner of his shop and picked up a beautiful violin, much finer than anything Isabella had ever touched. "Do you know why I run this shop?" he asked. Isabella shook her head. "I used to play with the city orchestra. First violin for 30 years. Then arthritis took my hands." He held them up, showing how they trembled slightly. "I can't play anymore, but I can teach, and I can recognize real passion when I see it." He handed her the violin. "Play something for me. Anything." With shaking hands, Isabella played a simple scale, then a basic melody she'd learned from her videos. It wasn't perfect. Her bow control was uneven, and she missed a few notes. But she played with her whole heart. When she finished, Mr. Levinson was smiling. "You want to know if you can learn that Massenet piece in 2 weeks?" "Yes. Alone?" "No, it's too advanced." He paused. "But with help? With the right guidance and enough practice? Maybe, just maybe." Isabella's heart jumped. "You'd help me?" "On one condition," Mr. Levinson said seriously. "We're not doing this to prove anything to those teachers. We're doing this because you deserve to play beautiful music. Deal?" Isabella nodded, even though she knew that wasn't entirely true. She did want to prove something. She wanted to wipe those smug smiles off their faces. "Come back tomorrow after school," Mr. Levinson said, "and bring your fighting spirit. We've got a lot of work to do." As Isabella left the shop, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope. The teachers thought they'd set up a joke, but they had no idea what they'd actually done. They'd lit a fire. The next afternoon, Isabella stood in Mr. Levinson's shop holding the borrowed violin like it was made of glass. Compared to her beat-up instrument at home, this one felt like holding a piece of art. The wood gleamed under the dim shop lights, and when she drew the bow across the strings, the sound was rich and clear. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Mr. Levinson said, watching her face. "That's a 100-year-old instrument. Take care of it, and it'll take care of you." He pulled out a copy of the sheet music for meditation from Teus and set it on the music stand. "Now let's see what we're dealing with." Isabella had listened to the piece at least 50 times since yesterday. She'd fallen asleep with it playing on her phone, dreaming of those long, sweeping melodies. But seeing the actual notes on paper made her stomach clench. It looked even harder than it sounded. "I don't think I can do this," she whispered. Mr. Levinson sat down in his worn armchair, the one he always used when teaching. "Play the first line for me. Just the first line." Isabella positioned the violin, took a breath, and tried. Her bow wobbled. The notes came out scratchy and uncertain. She barely made it through 4 measures before stopping, frustrated tears burning in her eyes. "Terrible, right?" she said. "No," Mr. Levinson replied calmly. "Unpolished. There's a difference." He stood up and came closer. "Your posture is wrong. Here." He gently adjusted her shoulders, her elbow, the angle of her wrist. "The violin isn't fighting you. You're fighting it. Relax." For the next hour, they didn't even practice the actual piece. Instead, Mr. Levinson had her work on bow control, making her draw long, slow strokes across the strings. Over and over. It was boring. Her arms started to ache. But slowly the sound became smoother, more consistent. "Good," he said finally. "That's enough for today. Tomorrow, same time. And Isabella, don't practice the full piece at home yet. Just work on your bow control. Trust the process." Walking home that evening, Isabella felt both hopeful and terrified. She had 13 days left. The next week became a blur of school, work, and practice. Isabella's schedule was brutal. She'd wake up at 6, practice scales and bow exercises for an hour before school. After classes, she'd rush to Mr. Levinson's shop for 2 hours of intense training. Then she'd go home, eat whatever quick dinner her father had prepared, do her homework, and practice for another 2 hours before collapsing into bed. Her fingers developed new calluses. The permanent red mark on her neck from the chin rest got darker. Her right arm ached constantly from the bow work, Roberto noticed. How could he not? His daughter was exhausted, pushing herself harder than he'd ever seen. Several times he almost told her to stop, that it wasn't worth it, that her health mattered more than any performance. But he also saw something else, a determination in her eyes, a fire. She wasn't just learning to play a piece of music. She was fighting for something bigger. "Mija," he said one night, finding her practicing past midnight. "You need sleep." "Just a few more minutes, Papa," she replied, not looking up from the sheet music. Roberto sat down on her bed. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Isabella lowered the violin. For a moment, she considered telling him the truth about the teachers and their cruel joke. But she knew her father. He'd march into that school and demand they cancel everything. He'd protect her the way he always did. "Because I want to prove I can," she said simply. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Roberto studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but promise me you'll take care of yourself. And if it becomes too much, you tell me. Deal?" "Deal." At Mr. Levinson's shop, the work was harder than anything Isabella had ever done. The old man was patient but demanding. He'd make her repeat the same measure 20, 30, 40 times until it was perfect. When her vibrato was too tight, he'd stop her. When her bow pressure was uneven, he'd stop her. When she rushed through a passage, he'd stop her. "Music isn't about playing the right notes," he'd say. "It's about making people feel something. You think those teachers chose this piece randomly? No. It's emotional. It's supposed to touch the heart. Right now you're just playing notes. I need you to play music." By day 8, Isabella could play through the entire piece without stopping, but Mr. Levinson wasn't satisfied. "It's technically correct," he said, tapping his fingers on his knee, "but it's cold, mechanical. Where's the emotion?" "I don't understand," Isabella said, frustrated. "I'm playing it exactly like the recording. That's the problem. You're copying someone else's interpretation. What does this music mean to you?" Isabella set down the violin. "I don't know. It's pretty?" Mr. Levinson sighed. He walked to a shelf and pulled down an old photo album, flipping through pages until he found what he was looking for. He showed Isabella a black and white photograph of a young woman holding a violin. "My wife," he said softly. She was a violinist too. Better than me, if I'm honest. This piece was her favorite. Isabella looked at the photo. The woman had a gentle smile and kind eyes. She died 5 years ago, Mr. Levinson continued. Cancer. By the end, she couldn't play anymore, too weak. But she'd ask me to play recordings of this piece for her. She said it reminded her of all the beautiful things in life. Love, hope, bittersweet memories. He closed the album carefully. That's what this music is about, Isabella. It's not just notes on a page. It's about finding beauty even when things are hard. It's about holding on to hope when everything seems impossible. Something clicked in Isabella's mind. She thought about her mother gone too soon. Her father working himself to exhaustion every day to give her a better life. Mr. Levinson, who couldn't play anymore but still found joy in teaching. The violin she'd bought for $2, broken but still making music. She picked up the instrument again. Can I try once more? This time, when she played, something was different. She wasn't thinking about the technical aspects. She wasn't worried about the teachers or the performance. She just felt the music. Let it flow through her. When she finished, Mr. Levinson was wiping his eyes with his handkerchief. That, he said, his voice rough with emotion. That is how you play this piece. The final few days were about refinement. Mr. Levinson worked with Isabella on stage presence, on how to walk out with confidence, how to handle her nerves. He borrowed a simple black dress from his niece for Isabella to wear. He even arranged for her to practice in an empty church with high ceilings, so she could get used to playing in a large space. On the night before the gala, Isabella's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the bow. I can't do this, she said to Mr. Levinson. What if I mess up? What if I freeze? What if everyone laughs? The old man placed his trembling hands on her shoulders. Let me tell you something about those teachers. They set you up to fail because they're small people. Small minds, small hearts. They think where you come from determines what you can achieve. He squeezed her shoulders gently. You know what the greatest revenge is? Not anger, not proving them wrong out of spite. It's succeeding in spite of them. It's being so good they can't ignore you. It's showing everyone watching that talent and heart matter more than money and privilege. But what if I'm not good enough? Then you're not good enough. So what? At least you tried. At least you didn't let fear stop you. He smiled. But Isabella, I've been teaching music for 40 years. I know talent when I see it. You're ready. Trust yourself. That night, Isabella could barely eat dinner. Her father had taken the night off from work to attend the gala. He'd bought a new tie, his first in 10 years. When Isabella saw it, she almost started crying. You didn't have to do that, Papa. Are you kidding? Roberto grinned. My daughter is performing at Westbridge Academy. I'm going to look my best. As Isabella lay in bed that night, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. The teachers who'd tried to make a fool of her. Mr. Levinson who'd believed in her. Her father who'd sacrificed so much. Her mother who she wished could be there to see this. She thought about that $2 violin under her bed. About the 3 years of teaching herself in a tiny apartment with thin walls. She thought about every late night, every aching finger, every moment of frustration and doubt. Tomorrow she'd step onto that stage. Tomorrow those teachers would be watching, expecting her to fail, ready to laugh. Tomorrow, wealthy parents and important people would see the janitor's daughter try to play classical music. Tomorrow, everything would change. Isabella closed her eyes and imagined the opening notes of meditation from Thais. In her mind, they were perfect, clear and strong and beautiful. She fell asleep, holding on to that image, not knowing that in 24 hours, the entire auditorium would be on their feet, that grown adults would be crying, that 3 teachers would be wishing they'd never come up with their cruel joke. But somewhere deep inside, past all the fear and doubt, a small part of Isabella already knew the truth. She was ready. The day of the gala arrived, with perfect spring weather. Sunlight streamed through Isabella's bedroom window, but she'd been awake since 5 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, her stomach twisted in knots. She'd barely touched her breakfast. Her father had made her favorite, Scrambled eggs with cheese, but it sat on her plate getting cold while she pushed it around with her fork. "You need to eat something, mija," Roberto said gently. "I can't. I feel sick." He sat down across from her, still wearing his pajamas. He had the day off, a rare thing. "You know what I think about when I'm nervous?" Isabella shook her head. "I think about your mother. How brave she was, even at the end. The doctors told her she had 6 months. She lived for 2 years. You know why? Because she decided fear wasn't going to win." He reached across the table and took Isabella's hand. "You have her courage. I see it every day." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. If she started crying now, she wouldn't stop. The gala didn't start until 7 in the evening, which meant Isabella had an entire day to think about what was coming. Every minute felt like an hour. She tried to practice, but her hands were shaking too much. She tried to watch television, but couldn't focus. She tried to read, but the words blurred together. At 5 o'clock, she started getting ready. She put on the simple black dress Mr. Levinson's niece had lent her. It fit perfectly. She brushed her long dark hair until it shined. Her father had bought her new shoes, black flats that were comfortable enough to stand in but nice enough for the occasion. When she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, she almost didn't recognize the girl staring back. She looked older, sophisticated, like someone who belonged on a stage. But inside, she still felt like the janitor's daughter who practiced in a tiny apartment with a broken violin. Roberto drove them to Westbridge Academy in their old car. It sputtered and coughed the whole way, and Isabella prayed it wouldn't break down. As they pulled into the parking lot, she saw luxury cars everywhere. Mercedes, BMWs, even a few Teslas. Their beat-up Toyota looked like it had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. "Papa, maybe we should park farther away," Isabella suggested quietly. Roberto looked at her seriously. "We have just as much right to be here as anyone else." Remember that inside the auditorium was transformed. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. The walls were decorated with flowers and elegant draping. Well-dressed people mingled in the lobby, holding champagne glasses and laughing. The women wore evening gowns and jewelry that probably cost more than Isabella's entire life. The men wore expensive suits and watches that gleamed under the lights. Isabella felt every eye turn toward them as they entered. She heard the whispers, saw the looks. Some were curious. Some were confused. A few were clearly judgmental. A student volunteer checked their names off a list. "Oh, you're the opening act," the girl said, barely glancing at them. "You need to go backstage. The performance starts in 30 minutes. Isabella's stomach dropped. 30 minutes. She squeezed her father's hand. "You've got this," he whispered. "I'll be right in the front row watching. Just look for me if you get scared." Backstage was chaos. Student musicians rushed around with instruments, adjusting their formal wear, doing last-minute practice runs. A few of them stared at Isabella with open curiosity when she walked in, carrying her borrowed violin case. "Can I help you?" a boy asked, not unkindly. "Are you looking for someone?" "I'm performing," Isabella said quietly. His eyebrows shot up. "Oh, you're the opening act." The way he said it made Isabella's cheeks burn. He'd clearly heard about her. They probably all had. The teacher's little joke had made the rounds. Mr. Patterson appeared then, clipboard in hand, looking stressed. When he saw Isabella, his face lit up with that same fake smile from 2 weeks ago. "There she is, our special guest performer." He checked his watch. "You'll go on in 25 minutes. Just walk out when they announce your name, stand center stage, and play your piece. Simple as that." "Where should I warm up?" Isabella asked. "Oh, don't worry about that," Mrs. Kim said, appearing beside Mr. Patterson. She was wearing a glittering silver gown. "This is just a casual opening number. Nothing too serious." They walked away, and Isabella heard Dr. Reynolds whisper something that made all three of them laugh. Her hands clenched into fists. She found a quiet corner backstage and opened her violin case. The beautiful instrument Mr. Levinson had lent her gleamed in the dim light. She ran her fingers along the smooth wood, remembering everything he'd taught her. "Play with your heart," she whispered to herself. "Not with your anger. Not with your fear. With your heart." The minutes ticked by too fast. Soon a stage manager with a headset was motioning her forward. "You're up in 2 minutes." Isabella could hear the crowd settling into their seats. The excited chatter died down. She peeked through the curtain and saw the auditorium was packed. Every seat was filled. Her eyes found her father in the front row, sitting up straight in his new tie. looking nervous but proud. She also saw Mr. Levinson. He'd somehow gotten a ticket and sat near the middle, his trembling hands folded in his lap. When he caught her eye, he nodded once. "You're ready." Mr. Patterson walked onto the stage to introduce her. The crowd applauded politely. Isabella couldn't hear exactly what he was saying, but she caught phrases like special opportunity and raw talent and different background. His tone was condescending, setting her up as some kind of charity case. The audience seemed confused about why a student from another school was performing. Some whispered to each other. Others looked at their programs, searching for her name. Then Mr. Patterson said her name, and the spotlight turned toward the wings where she stood. This was it. No more practice. No more preparation. Just her and the violin in a room full of people expecting her to fail. Isabella walked onto that stage. The walk felt like it took forever. Her new shoes clicked on the polished wood floor. The spotlight was blinding. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, judging her simple dress, her lack of jewelry, everything about her that screamed, "Doesn't belong here." She reached the center of the stage. The microphone picked up the sound of her setting her feet, positioning the violin under her chin. In the front row, her father's hands were clasped together like he was praying. Isabella closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her mother singing in the kitchen, her father mopping these same floors at night, Mr. Levinson's wife who'd loved this piece, the $2 violin that had started everything. Then she raised her bow and began to play. The first note rang out clear and pure, filling every corner of that massive auditorium. It was a long, sustained note that seemed to hang in the air like a prayer. No wobble, no uncertainty, just beautiful, aching sound. Isabella's bow moved across the strings like water, smooth and flowing. Her fingers found each position perfectly, muscle memory taking over where thought would have failed. The melody rose and fell, swelled and retreated, told a story without words. In the audience, conversations stopped. Whispers died. People who'd been checking their phones slowly lowered them. The piece was supposed to be background music, something to barely pay attention to before the real performances began. But everyone was paying attention now. Isabella's eyes stayed closed, but she could feel the shift in the room. She poured everything into that violin, every late-night practice session, every doubt she'd overcome, every time someone had looked at her like she didn't matter. It all flowed through her fingers, through the bow, through the strings. The melody climbed higher, became more passionate, more urgent. Her vibrato was perfect, adding warmth and emotion to every note. The difficult passages that had seemed impossible 2 weeks ago now felt natural, like breathing. In the front row, Roberto had tears streaming down his face. He'd never been so proud in his entire life. Near the middle, Mr. Levinson sat with his eyes closed, his trembling hands finally still, lost in the music his wife had loved. Throughout the audience, people were leaning forward in their seats. Some had tears in their eyes. This wasn't what they'd expected. This wasn't amateur hour. This was real. This was professional. This was beautiful. Backstage, the 3 teachers stood frozen, their smug smiles long gone. Mr. Patterson's face had gone pale. Mrs. Kim's mouth hung open. Dr. Reynolds looked like she might be sick. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The piece built toward its climax, and Isabella put everything she had into those final measures. Her bow flew across the strings, her fingers danced up the fingerboard, and the sound that came out was pure magic. Then, the final note, long and sweet and perfect, fading slowly into silence. Isabella lowered her violin and opened her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. Isabella's heart pounded. Had she messed up? Had it not been good enough? Then one person started clapping. Her father, Roberto, standing up in the front row, applauding with everything he had. Then Mr. Levinson stood, clapping hard despite his arthritis. Then someone else. And another. And another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on their feet. The applause was deafening. People weren't just clapping politely. They were cheering, shouting, "Brava!" wiping tears from their eyes. Isabella stood there stunned, her violin hanging at her side. This was really happening. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. In the front row, her father was crying and laughing at the same time, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. The three teachers stood at the side of the stage, suddenly very aware that hundreds of people were now looking at them with new eyes. Someone near the front had heard their earlier comments about the amusing opening act. Word was already spreading through the crowd. What had they done? Isabella took a bow, her legs shaking so badly she almost fell. But she held it together. She smiled. And as she walked off that stage, past Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Kim and Dr. Reynolds who couldn't meet her eyes, she held her head high. The janitor's daughter had just brought down the house, and nothing would ever be the same again. Isabella barely remembered walking off the stage. Her legs felt like rubber, and her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the violin. Backstage, the other student musicians stared at her with wide eyes. No one said anything. They just watched her pass, their expressions a mix of shock and something that looked like respect. She found a chair in the corner and sat down heavily, trying to catch her breath. Her heart was pounding like she'd just run a marathon. Had that really happened? Had she really just played like that in front of all those people? The stage manager approached, looking flustered. That was unexpected. The program coordinator wants to see you after the show. Before Isabella could respond, her father burst through the backstage door. He wasn't supposed to be back there, but no one tried to stop him. He swept Isabella into a tight hug, and she could feel him trembling. "Mija, that was incredible," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would have been so proud." Isabella hugged him back, finally letting the tears come. All the stress and fear and exhaustion of the past 2 weeks came pouring out. She cried into her father's shoulder while he held her and told her over and over how proud he was. When she finally pulled away, Mr. Levinson was there too, his old eyes bright with tears. "You played it perfectly," he said simply. "Not just the notes. The heart. You found the heart of the piece." The rest of the gala continued, but Isabella barely paid attention. Other students performed their pieces, all of them technically good, all of them well-trained. But something had shifted in the room. The audience was polite, but the energy wasn't the same. Nothing could quite match the raw emotion of what they'd witnessed with Isabella's performance. During intermission, Isabella stayed backstage, not sure what to do. She could hear people talking in the lobby, their voices excited and animated. Several times she heard her name mentioned. Then a woman in an elegant navy dress appeared backstage. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair pulled back in a sleek bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. Something about the way she carried herself made everyone nearby straighten up. "Isabella Flores?" the woman asked. Isabella stood quickly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Helen Ashworth. My family founded this academy 80 years ago. I'm on the board of directors." She studied Isabella carefully. That was quite a performance. "Thank you," Isabella said quietly, unsure where this was going. Mrs. Ashworth's expression hardened slightly. "I've been hearing some disturbing things about how you came to perform tonight, about certain teachers and their intentions." Isabella's stomach clenched. She glanced at her father, who'd moved closer protectively. "Before we continue," Mrs. Ashworth said, "I want you to know that this is not how Westbridge operates, or at least it's not how it should operate." She paused. "Would you mind telling me your side of the story?" So Isabella did. She told Mrs. Ashworth everything. About overhearing the teacher's conversation, about their cruel joke, about how they'd expected her to fail. She told her about teaching herself violin for 3 years, about Mr. Levinson's help, about the 2 weeks of intense practice. When she finished, Mrs. Ashworth's face was set in stone. "I see," she said quietly. "And where are these teachers now?" As if on cue, Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Kim, and Dr. Reynolds appeared. They'd clearly been summoned. All three looked uncomfortable, their earlier confidence completely gone. "Is this true?" Mrs. Ashworth asked them directly. "Did you invite this young woman to perform as some kind of joke?" Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Well, we thought it would be educational. A contrast between natural ability and proper training." "That's a lie, and you know it." Mrs. Ashworth cut him off coldly. "I've already spoken to several faculty members who heard you laughing about this, making bets on how badly she'd do." Mrs. Kim's face had gone pale. Dr. Reynolds was staring at her shoes. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mrs. Ashworth continued, her voice sharp as ice. "You tried to humiliate a 15-year-old girl to make yourselves feel superior. You used your positions of authority to set up what you thought would be a public failure. And why? Because her father works as a janitor? Because she doesn't come from money? We didn't mean any real harm, Dr. Reynolds said weakly. Didn't mean harm? Mrs. Ashworth's voice rose slightly. You tried to destroy this girl's confidence. You wanted to use her as an example to reinforce your own prejudices. That's not education. That's cruelty. The backstage area had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching. Mrs. Ashworth turned back to Isabella. I am deeply sorry for what you've endured. You handled it with more grace and dignity than these so-called educators deserve. She paused. But I'd like to propose something. Have you ever considered attending Westbridge? Isabella blinked. What? We have scholarship programs. Full scholarships for exceptional students. Room, board, tuition, private music instruction, everything covered. Mrs. Ashworth's expression softened slightly. After what I witnessed tonight, I'd say you more than qualify. Isabella's mind was spinning. Westbridge Academy. The school she'd watched from the outside for years, thinking it was a world she could never be part of. I don't know, she said slowly, looking at her father. My school is fine. I have friends there, and Papa would want what's best for you. Roberto finished gently. He looked at Mrs. Ashworth. This is very generous, but we need to think about it. Talk about it as a family. Of course, Mrs. Ashworth said. Take all the time you need. My contact information will be made available to you. She glanced at the three teachers. As for you three, we'll be having a board meeting on Monday morning. I suggest you prepare your resignations. Mr. Patterson started to protest, but Mrs. Ashworth held up her hand. This institution was built on the principle that excellence knows no economic boundary. You've forgotten that. Or worse, you never believed it. Either way, you don't belong here. She turned and walked away, leaving the three teachers standing there, their careers crumbling around them. The next few days were a blur. Someone had recorded Isabella's performance on their phone, and by Monday morning, the video had over 1 million views. By Tuesday, it was on national news. Local reporters wanted interviews. Music schools started calling, offering scholarships and opportunities. Isabella's principal at her public school called her into the office, beaming with pride, asking if she'd perform at their spring concert. Her classmates treated her like a celebrity. Even kids who'd never spoken to her before suddenly wanted to be her friend. But the most surprising call came from Mrs. Kim. Isabella almost didn't answer when she saw the number, but curiosity got the better of her. Isabella. Mrs. Kim's voice was quiet, strained. I know I have no right to call you, but I needed to say something. Isabella waited silent. What we did was unforgivable, Mrs. Kim continued. I've been teaching for 15 years and I thought I was a good person. But I let my prejudices and my ego turn me into someone cruel, someone who hurt a child for entertainment. Why are you telling me this? Isabella asked. Because you deserve an apology, a real one. Not because I'm trying to save my job, that's already gone, but because what I did was wrong and you needed to hear that from me directly. Mrs. Kim's voice cracked. You're an incredible musician. But more than that, you're a better person than I am. You could have been angry and bitter, but instead you just played beautifully. That says everything about who you are. After a long pause, Isabella said, Thank you for saying that. I hope someday you can forgive me, Mrs. Kim said, but I'll understand if you can't. When Isabella hung up, she found her father watching her from the doorway. Was that one of the teachers? He asked. Isabella nodded. She apologized. She sounded like she meant it. And, how do you feel? Isabella thought about it. Angry still. But also, I don't know. Sad for her, maybe. She threw away her whole career because she couldn't see past where someone comes from. Roberto smiled sadly. That's very mature of you, mija. A week later, Isabella made her decision about Westbridge. She turned them down. The choice surprised everyone, including Mrs. Ashworth, who'd called personally to try to change her mind. I appreciate the offer, Isabella explained. Really, I do. But I don't want to leave my school, my friends, my dad. And honestly, I don't need Westbridge to become a great musician. Mr. Levinson is teaching me just fine. What Isabella did accept was a partial scholarship to a prestigious summer music program at a nearby university. She'd spend 8 weeks learning from professional musicians, networking and improving her skills, and she'd come home every weekend. She also started teaching. 3 kids from her neighborhood, whose families couldn't afford private lessons, became her first students. She taught them in Mr. Levinson's shop on Saturday mornings, passing on everything she was learning. Mr. Patterson was fired. Dr. Reynolds resigned before she could be dismissed. Mrs. Kim left teaching entirely and, from what Isabella heard, started volunteering at a community center in a low-income neighborhood. Maybe she was trying to make amends. 6 months later, Isabella performed at a local concert hall, a real venue with professional acoustics and a full house. The tickets were cheap, so families from all over the city could afford to come. Her father sat in the front row again, wearing his good tie. Mr. Levinson sat beside him, proud as could be. This time, Isabella played 3 pieces, including Meditation from Thais.